Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Director, you talked earlier about there being no daylight between the Communist Party in China and the government in China and the business community. Does that include Chinese students in foreign countries?
It certainly includes some Chinese students, not all by any stretch of the imagination, but some.
I need your help in understanding how we're making the distinction. As we know, we have a lot of foreign students that come to our fine universities, and our fine universities love them because they pay full freight, they pay full tuition. In fact, some of our universities, I think, are addicted financially to them. When a foreign student, let's just say for example, China, comes to MIT, let's say, and works in a lab there on new technology that is being developed, are we relying on the universities to determine whether the students are stealing intellectual property?
Well, I would say the university certainly plays an important role. There may be situations where we, through our investigative work, learn that somebody's trying to steal intellectual property. So then we both play a role. There's a partnership.
Here's what I'm getting to. We have thousands of students coming to our American universities. Many of them are in research labs. Many of them are privy to sensitive intellectual property. How do we check them? Whose job is it to check them? You can't check. The FBI can't check every single student that comes to the United States. If we're relying on a university to do it, my guess is a lot of them don't know how. And frankly, some of them probably don't care as long as they're getting the tuition.
Well, I think you're on to the right point, right, which is there is a role for the universities to play, but we need to make sure that we're supplying them with, you said whether they know and whether they care, whether they have both the tools that we can give them to ask the right questions, to elicit the right information, on the one hand, but also to be thoughtful about what of their information is most proprietary, most sensitive. There might be a difference, for example, between a student who comes in to do basic undergraduate work,
of course,
and a student on the other extreme who's working on some of the most sensitive technological research this country has.
Of course.
And then as far as the should they care part of it, one of the things the FBI is spending a lot of time doing is out on the ground engaging with universities, research labs, et cetera, to try to help them understand the nature of the threat, what to be on the lookout for, et cetera. So there's a common defense quality to this.
Well, should we not have a rule, Mr. Director, that says, look, if you're from another country, not just China, but other countries, and you're coming to this university to be involved with this research, then the university has to apply for and receive a deemed export license. And don't tell me that the student is just observing. We're going to be cautious here and say, university, go get a deemed export license.
Well, I'm not an expert on deemed export licenses. I think there may be roles for rule changes, et cetera, that might help us collectively better protect the country and our most sensitive information.
I don't think our universities are doing it. I think some are, and some are doing a good job. But I think others say, oh, it's not my responsibility. And by the way, their tuition check cashed.
I see exactly where you're coming from. I guess what I would say is my experience now, and having gone out and about around the country and met with all 56 field offices as well as with partners, including in the academic sector, in an awful lot of those states, is that there are a growing number of universities which are much smarter now about this issue than they used to be. Not necessarily where we need to be.
They are, and of course the cow is out the barn in many respects. The universities weren't shy about inviting Confucius institutes to their campuses. They're glad to have the money. I mean, Australia has the same problem. Many Australian universities are addicted to tuition from Chinese students. I'm not criticizing Australia. Wonderful ally, great country. God bless them. But this has become a serious problem, and I sense you're spread thin. I sense that we're relying on our universities, and it's great to educate them. But as long as those tuition checks clear, some of them aren't going to really participate. And I think what we need is some sort of rule that in these particular technologies, you university have to go get a deemed export license. Let me shift gears. Is the FBI involved in the investigation in Chicago of the Jussie Smollett police complaint?
I'm not sure there's anything I can say about whether we're involved in a specific investigation or not.
Okay, that's fair. I consider you, first, I consider you to be doing a great job. I think you've settled the waters, Chris, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I don't think you're a politician. That's what I like about you. I think you're a good lawyer, and you care about the FBI, and I consider you the nation's chief law enforcement official, if not one of the chiefs. I don't mean to denigrate the Attorney General. He's up there, too. Why do so many Americans today, in your judgment, hate cops just because they're cops?
You know, I think there's some level of misunderstanding about what law enforcement does and doesn't do, and that's probably part of it. But I also think far more Americans revere law enforcement than sometimes the media would otherwise suggest. And that's one of the advantages I've found to getting out of Washington and trying to visit all 56 field offices and to visit not only the men and women of state and local law enforcement in each of those states, but also to meet with people in the community from each of those states, because that's a better way for me to get a sense of how people think about law enforcement. So I don't think most people hate law enforcement. I think most people are grateful for law enforcement. But the reality is that there is a level of violence that is occurring in this country, and a willingness to use lethality against law enforcement that I think we just cannot abide, and we need to be finding ways to make those people who work so hard every day more safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.